Cool. Well, go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone and thanks for joining us today. My name is Angie Furman and I'm the River Training Center Coordinator at River Management Society. River Management Society, for those who might not be familiar, is a professional organization dedicated to supporting those who work on and around rivers throughout the US, as well as supporting the future of river management. And we're a proud partner with a cohort of 12 universities and colleges, and we offer the River Studies and Leadership Certificate. I know some of you are joining today from schools that offer the certificate. Some might be interested in learning more about the certificate. I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. But today's webinar or virtual discussion is the second in our series, and it's about getting started with federal career pathways. So before we get started, I'd just like to cover a few housekeeping items. So we do have a live transcript available today for this discussion. To access that, you can just go to your meeting control bar and click live transcript and select show subtitles or hide subtitles if you don't want to see them. We're also going to be doing Q&A throughout today's discussion. So we've enabled the chat feature. You just click the chat button. It's on the right-hand side of your screen. If you have any questions, pop them in there before you forget them. We're also going to be taking some breaks and having time for you to just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask questions with any of our presenters and panelists today. Also, this is being recorded. So if you miss anything, don't worry. We're going to send this out to everyone who's registered afterwards. And it's also going to be available on the RMS video channel. So just real quick, a little bit about the River Studies and Leadership Certificate Program. This webinar series is one of the ways that we're helping students who are part of the certificate program or who are interested in it to connect them to potential career fields and opportunities. As I mentioned, we're proud to partner with 12 universities and colleges to offer the certificate. And to earn this certificate, students at participating institutions complete coursework in river-related study areas. They'll complete a professional internship, gain on-the-water experience, and have the opportunity to present at the River Management Symposium or in the RMS Journal. So in addition to the certificate and the network of river professionals that you gain access to, each RSLC student receives a free one-year membership to RMS, and that includes a subscription to our journal, our biweekly newsletter, our listserv, as well as access to regional chapter events like a river trip float. We just did one with our Southwest chapter this last weekend. If you're a student at a participating institution who wants to join the certificate program, I encourage you to reach out to your advisor at that school. If you're not sure who that is, you can also contact me, Angie at river-management.org, and I'll put my email in the chat. Or if you have any general questions about the certificate, feel free to reach out. So right now, we'd just love to get to know who's here, what type of career you're interested in. And in particular, we're curious if there's a particular region of the country or a type of ecosystem that interests you. If you share that in the chat box right now, that will help us to tailor some of today's conversation. And now I'm going to go ahead and pass it on over to my colleague at the Forest Service, Tangi Weissman, to share a little bit more about today.
Hey guys, I'm Tangi. I'm going to do just a really brief presentation to help get you guys oriented and aware of a lot of the opportunities that are available in the Forest Service and other land management agencies, because it can be hard to kind of untangle the way that they work because these agencies are so vast, and they also work really closely with a lot of partners. So I'll kind of break down how you might ask yourself a few questions about your skill set and what you're seeking so that you can figure out what the best place to apply for jobs is, and then best ways to do that, because there are a lot of really great hiring programs that continue to recruit more and more people and gain awareness within the agencies as really wonderful options for finding great candidates for new jobs. And some of them even have special hiring authorities that give you another leg up in getting hired. But let me go ahead and share my screen just so you guys have a little bit of a visual while I gave you kind of a brief overview of water resources in the Forest Service, because I think some people will be surprised the vast number of lands that are managed by the Forest Service. So let me see if I can get this going here. And then I also wanted to share in the meantime that we have a few folks with us who actually participated in some of the hiring programs, who work with the Forest Service now and who have a lot of insight. So you'll be able to ask them a few questions about their experience or the particular programs that they've been a part of. And if you want to further those conversations, we can definitely do that after the meeting as well. So I just wanted to start with a little bit of a figure because I think that some people don't know that the national forests and grasslands are actually the largest source of fresh water in the US under one single manager, with about 20% of those water resources flowing across 193 million acres of land. So I know that you guys are probably familiar with different jurisdictions and waterways, whether it's on private lands or in urban areas or maybe in your own backyard. But federal land management agencies manage a vast majority of these water resources. And so if you want to be close to these places, it's a wonderful place to start. And then maybe another thing to know is that because the Forest Service has been around for some time, their long-term research studies provide a lot of the current understanding of watershed processes across forests and grasslands, really on a global scale. So our research and development branch has been able to compile studies from so many different ecosystems for many years. And so are really a leader in research on that front. And then we also, have a lot of recreation that takes place. So there's both that scientific perspective and activities that are done around waterways in the Forest Service, but also the recreational side, because there's a lot of amazing fisheries, amazing whitewater rafting, boating, kayaking, and all the other recreation activities that people love to do around rivers. So if you're interested on the policy end of the spectrum, management, or in research and field work, it's all there and it's all done by the Forest Service. But to give you a little bit better understanding of who does this type of work in the Forest Service, I just wanted to brush over a lot of positions here. Because I think one thing to know about working for the federal government or the Forest Service in particular is that not every area of interest or program has a super clear and defined career pathway. And this is really one of those examples. Working around water resources doesn't necessarily have a clear progressive ladder. So it's really important to note your skill set and how you can still apply it and work around a resource that you love, using the skills that you have and the education you have, but also just being mindful that there's a variety of positions that you could end up working from. And so just to kind of give you an overview, I'll kind of start with river managers. So a river manager typically works on a complex river system. So that might be complex because of its vast size, because of the values and characteristics it has, because of the importance of its ecosystem, or it might just have a lot of visitors. There's a lot of iconic rivers across the US that receive millions of visitors every year. So typically just units, on Forest Service lands that have this level of complexity will have an actual river manager, who's dedicated to oversee an entire river program. And so they have a lot of functions, and most of it is working and coordinating across a lot of different groups. So some of these groups would include outfitters and guides, making sure to check in with folks who do any sort of monitoring on the river. So they probably work with the fisheries biologist and the hydrologist, or folks who might be collecting water quality data. They'll also usually oversee a crew of rangers. So these would be the folks who actually get to be out on the river navigating and helping visitors and maybe executing some of that monitoring related work. They also work with engineers and folks who do any sort of projects in waterways or around waterways that could impact the health of those rivers or could conflict with the protections that are in place for those rivers. And then they work with partners. Oftentimes different rivers on Forest Service lands have deep cultural values. The community really loves it. It might have a vibrant history of use. And so there might be a lot of advocacy groups or friend groups that advocate for the health of that river and access to that river. So being a river manager really requires great leadership and ability to work with a lot of different groups and coordinate and understand policy. So then I also briefly mentioned river rangers. And so there's quite a few river ranger positions in the Forest Service. They tend to be seasonal positions, meaning that you work during one portion of the year. And that's typically managing a lot of visitor use, so welcoming and helping those visitors, maintaining any facilities around the riverway. Oftentimes there's restroom facilities or boat ramps or parking lots or places where people gain access to the river. And then they also provide safety assistance, so they usually have experience navigating different areas of the riverway, and then can monitor the conditions of the river, whether it's visual resource or noting any sort of degradation to the river corridor as well. So another thing I want to highlight is that there are all kinds of support staff, and I'll get to this in another portion of the presentation as well, but the Forest Service has regions that are managed by regional offices that can serve some of the common needs that might happen in those geographic areas. And so there are folks that work on river programs or, with water resources at that level. So they're really important for thinking of long-term strategies, communicating and interpreting policy, working with folks in the Washington office who oversee, policy and management principles and helping guide the field and providing that technical assistance to them as they make decisions. And so they also might give shape to a regional strategy to improve water resources. So that's another angle that's a little bit different, but is still critically important for the management of rivers, even though they might not always be in the river corridor every day. So the rest of these are like a variety of specialists. And so it's just important to note that if you have certain skill sets regarding GIS and mapping skills, if you are deeply interested in hydrology or fish and wildlife, architecture, engineering, all of these specialists may not have a position that's 100% dedicated to only doing projects that regard water resources, but having a background and an interest in those things gives you a good chance to work as a specialist who will serve the unit that they're on, in the Forest Service for many different types of projects, but would have that special expertise when it comes to riverways or watersheds. So it's just important to note that if you do have any of these skill sets, it's definitely a viable way to find a valuable position in the Forest Service and a way that you could get yourself close to some of these waterways or activities and projects around them is to identify units that have, thriving river programs or have a lot of staff and support for work that they're doing around the rivers, because obviously the US has a lot of different ecosystems and some have way less waterways and resources than others. So that's a big part of kind of figuring out what types of positions could get you closest to being able to work around the amazing water resources that we have. So next, I want to move into things to consider here that I highlighted, and I've already kind of dived into location, but I really think when you're thinking about where the Forest Service and many other land management agencies, one position could look way different on two different units. So someone who works in the Pacific Northwest as a fisheries biologist might have a way different set of conditions and values and challenges that they're working under, considering the value of the fisheries resource to the economy in the Pacific Northwest, and the recreation attention that it receives for fishing, as compared to another part of the US where that resource just really isn't as vibrant or valued. So that's something to really consider. Where does your area of expertise or your interest really apply the most? And so that can really help you get started in understanding what your workload will really look like. Because again, we have, position descriptions that are generalized and applied, but they can, in practice, look very different in different parts of the country on different units. So then the next thing that's important to know about the Forest Service and other land management agencies is that they are structured a certain way. And so typically when people first get introduced to land management, it's from actually visiting. And who do they see? They see the field staff, the folks who actually work on the forest or on the district, and who are walking around in the field and interacting with visitors. So that certainly is one of the coolest and most important levels of these agencies, and where a lot of amazing work gets done and implemented. But for the Forest Service, we also have regional staff, which I kind of highlighted earlier. And we have 9 different regions that are segmented across the US, where regional program managers sit. And so we have a lot of different programs in the Forest Service to take care of all the different activities that happen on Forest Service lands. And those program managers are there to give a unified vision and strategy, and to take feedback from the field and support their field specific to their regional needs. And they really play a unique role because they also correspond with the Washington office as well. So anybody who is policy minded, management minded, who wants to be in a leadership role, it's important to remember that we have regional staff, and we also have a Washington office, national headquarters. That's actually where I sit. I didn't actually introduce myself very well, by the way. I work for the Wilderness and Wild and Scenic Rivers program in the Washington office. And so it's been an interesting experience getting introduced to the Forest Service from that angle, because I visited the national headquarters before I visited the national forests on the ground. But the Washington office is responsible for corresponding with Congress and kind of managing and implementing new legislation. If there's new land designations, folks across the country like to advocate for their rivers and waterways, and sometimes they designate rivers under the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, or they might receive other types of protections. So the Washington office gives that long-term strategy and vision and shape to the program, and is really responsible for making sure they meet the statutory requirements that are outlined for their program. And so that's the level that I work at. It's really fun because you get to partner with people all the time and work with everyone in the field. And so that's just another important facet of land management to consider, is that it all happens, sort of in a hierarchy. There's a different structure for how these huge programs are actually rolled out across the country. So I think the last thing I want to note, just to prime someone who's considering a federal career, is that you really have to be versatile. And the reason for that is that, over time, because budgets change and agency priorities change, the structure of any given program can change. And sometimes resources are plentiful and sometimes resources are small. So the folks in the field who are responsible for covering the same amounts of activities might have more on their plate during seasons when capacity is low and there's less people working on the program, and they might get to be more specialized when resources are plentiful and there's lots of people on their staff. But any given Forest Service unit has different challenges, and really what that's due to is the way that they, try to specifically serve the communities around them. And that's really one of the key things to remember, is that all of these lands are to be stewarded for the communities and for, the citizens of the US who get to, connect with these places. And so any given community has different needs, different histories, and different resources and interests and stakeholders over any surrounding lands. And so every unit has different needs, and so that's just really important to consider. Once you start carving out like what region you might want to work in, or ecosystems and stuff, you know, giving a call to that district office or to that forest supervisor office and asking like, what are your guys' priorities? What are your greatest challenges here? Like, what do you really do? You know, is timber really big here? Or do you have issues with wildfire? Or do you have a thriving rivers program? Like really asking what any given unit needs is important because again, very few folks get to work in a tiny little bubble as a specialist who just spends hours on the same topic. Everyone works together as a team and works with their community and partners to accomplish the work. So the more you can learn about their needs and who's at the table doing the work with you, the better off you'll be in understanding how Forest Service units function. Let me see, get to the last slide here. So what we want to offer today is a few options that you guys can check out just to get more oriented with the types of positions that are available, but also to see that like there's quite a few hiring programs available to students. And so I wanted to help just gloss over them so you can distinguish the difference between them because they all have kind of long names and it's hard to tell one from the other. But I just wanted to brush over them so you can see what's available to you as a student and what might be the best fit for you. So hold on, let me pull up my notes because I actually participated in one of these, but we'll start with the 21st Century Conservation Corps. So essentially this would be more field-based work. A lot of folks who join the Conservation Service Corps get to do a lot of work around facilities. So if you really want to be in the field, doing work on the ground. Maybe you want to be a part of a group that does trail work or gets to rebuild facilities or provide, you know, conservation education or do restoration projects. This is a wonderful group to work with. And then I can move over to the Resource Assistance Program. I'm most familiar with this one. And this is for folks of, I think you just have to be like 17 and up. So we have people who are post-grad who have joined and, you know, people who join when they're in high school. But it's a paid internship. I think some partners, there's a bunch of different partner organizations that help to fund the position and they form a formal agreement with a Forest Service unit who wants to host a resource assistant. And so the resource assistance provided with paycheck, with a stipend, sometimes health insurance is available. And then really what it's supposed to be is an immersive experience where you get to learn all the fundamentals of the program you're working on, work on, you know, real projects with your supervisor. And at the end of a 6-month term, or once you reach the threshold of the number of hours that you work with the Forest Service unit, you receive a hiring authority, and it's called a direct hiring authority. And this is really critical and versatile, and a lot of hiring managers find it attractive because it really speeds up the process of onboarding a new employee. And so I was able to utilize my direct hire authority. And basically what that meant is that when there was a position that was open, all I needed to do was submit an application that showed my skill set and why it qualified for the position itself. And then a hiring manager reviews it, runs it through a few authorities. And then if you are qualified, they can initiate the hiring process without posting the job to the general public. Because as you guys might know, most jobs are posted on USA Jobs where any person from the public can apply to a government job. And usually a hiring manager will be reviewing hundreds of resumes to get it down to a final few candidates. And that process can be really tricky. So that's just one great advantage of completing the resource assistance program, because then you can receive that hiring authority and it really gives you more of a clear fast track into a long-term career with the Forest Service. So then I'll highlight a few of the other pathways programs. You might see these listings on USA Jobs, and if you kind of filter your search, you'll be able to find programs that are appropriate for your like schooling level. But there is an internship program through Pathways where you can explore federal careers while you're still in school. There's also a recent graduates program. So folks who have completed a graduate degree can apply for these, and it's specifically tailored to them. And then there's also a presidential management fellows program. And so I think those folks have an advanced degree within the past 2 years. And if there's a few other requirements for that one, but that one usually leads to folks in leadership positions pretty early. I know a lot of folks who have done this program who really kind of had a vision for how they wanted to contribute very early on in their career, and they usually take on leadership positions pretty quickly within land management agencies with their skill set. So this is just a variety of the programs that are available. And again, we have a few folks here who have completed them. So if you have questions about them, you can definitely ask. But yeah, they're all great ways to either just take a look at the types of positions that are available right now, or to find a way to get engaged. And I guess the last thing that I'll highlight, the timing is a little unfortunate because I think the opening for this is, the window is now closed, but this is another, like, if you really just wanted to dip your toe in and you're like, I'm not ready to move to a unit or commit to a whole program yet, this is a wonderful program. It's called the Virtual Student Federal Service Program. And this is actually hosted by the Department of State. And so what students do is they get to look at a huge list of projects that different government agencies post that their programs are looking for help with. And then students can select their top 3 or their favorites. And then they get to do a quick interview with the staff who posted the project. And if they like you, then for 10 hours a week throughout the school year, you just check in with your staff every week. You get to ask them questions, gain some mentorship and do some networking with their program and with their agency while just working on a project for them. And so an example, like my staff is currently hosting quite a few interns from this program, and we have a few folks doing mapping projects. So the students, like a few of them, they were like, oh, I'm not actually that well versed in conservation or, natural resources, but I love GIS. I just love it. I think it's a great communication tool. So we posted a GIS project, and a lot of, enthusiastic candidates applied for the project. And now we do weekly check-ins with them. We introduce them to other Forest Service staff. We give them a mentor, and they just work on a mapping project in their free time, throughout the week. And it's very flexible, like if they're too busy one week, then we just make the workload a little bit lower. But this is really the best way to build a relationship with folks and just get a lot of insight from getting to see, like, oh, what are your guys' real priorities? What's your workflow like? What are the hot topics in your program or your resource area right now? So if those are the types of questions you have, and if you don't have the time to commit to one of these other programs, that's a good one to look out for next year. And so it just runs for the entirety of the school year. But yeah, with that, I have a few other resources I'll be able to share in the chat with you guys, but we have a hiring events calendar. So that's a good one to check out if you want to ask even more questions to recruiters or get advice on how you might revise your resume and just get all the fundamentals and your materials ready, for whenever you might want to apply. And then we also have a job seeker database where I believe you can put in a few attributes of the types of jobs that you like. And then every time one is posted, you get an email notification. And then you can be like, oh, cool, like call the hiring manager, ask about it, and put together a resume and everything. So that would be a great way to just keep yourself like positioned to be able to apply at any given time. But with that, I'm just going to pause because it'd be nice to hear someone else talk and let you guys have some space for questions.
Yeah, you can just go ahead and unmute, Edward, if you want. I saw you raise your hand. Or
Yeah, hello. I'm Edward. I go to BCU in Richmond, and I'm pretty interested in getting involved with the certificate program. And I think, Tanji, you mentioned something about some communities have to designate their rivers to be like, is it like qualified or like denoted as like a wild and scenic river? Like, how does that process work? And are there only some does that mean there are only some rivers that are like overseen by your staff or office?
Right, yeah, that's a good question. So the National Wild and Scenic River System spans the US in a variety of ecosystems. And so wild and scenic rivers are actually legislated in an act to receive certain protections. And then it's mandated that a management plan is developed for those rivers. So it can happen in a variety of ways, but the ideal way is that there's a level of community support in partnership but behind managing that river. And so the Forest Service manages a lot of those rivers. The Park Service actually manages some, same with the Bureau of Land Management and Fish and Wildlife Service. So we actually coordinate on an interagency basis to make sure we have some consistency to the way that we do that. And then there's even a few rivers that are called partnership rivers that have a different structure of management, usually where the majority of the work is implemented through a partner or a local community, but they're assisted by a federal agency to do that. But yeah, so in order for a river to receive that level of protection, which ultimately, one of the key pieces of wild and scenic river level protection is to keep the waterway free flowing. So usually from water resources projects like dams, and other types of structures that are used to modify the waterway. And then they also have certain values that are identified that should be protected and enhanced. But there actually is a whole inventory of rivers across federal lands that have like the potential to be designated. So basically the land management agencies like study and inventory the rivers that they do have. So if someone like were to want to advocate or designate one, they already have some information about that waterway and some maps on it. So if they were to go ahead and designate it, they'd have a little something to work off of.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Did anyone else have any questions? If so, feel free to just unmute and ask.
And then, yeah, if we do have a pause in the questions, I just wanted to introduce some of the folks we have here who have participated in some of the hiring programs or who, are working with the Forest Service, just so they can talk about some of the stuff that they're doing to give folks a picture of what that transition kind of looks like. So is it okay, Sarah, would you mind introducing yourself and just give a little background of how you got to where you are now and what you're doing?
Yeah, thanks. My name is Sarah Smith, and I work for the Forest Service. My position is social science analyst, which is a little bit vague, but I work in the recreation program. And I manage the Pecos River, and that is a wild and scenic river designated under the act that Tanji was just discussing. I also do some other things like manage guides and outfitters on the river, and I manage recreational cabins in the river corridor. So various things like that related to the river. It's just a piece of what I do. But I did participate in the River Studies and Leadership Certificate Program at Northern Arizona University. So I can answer questions about that if there are any. And I was hired on permanently to the Forest Service under the Resource Assistance Program. So same pathway that Tanji used as well.
Thanks, Sarah. Ruby, nice to meet you. Thanks for joining us. Would you mind introducing yourself and maybe just highlighting, a program that you work with and what you're doing now?
Sure. So, hi guys, my name is Ruby. I am a resource assistant in the Resource Assistant Program at Tonto National Forest, which is in Arizona. And I am a hydrologist intern. So I've only been in this internship for, this is my third official week. So I don't know like all of the stuff that I'm going to be working on, but so far it's a lot of managing all of the rivers and springs and streams and lakes in Tonto National Forest. There's only 3 hydrologists in Tonto, and I'm one of them. So we have a lot of work to do. dealing with water rights. We do a lot of field work. We do a lot of, oh man, what are they called? But it deals with, I think it deals with water rights, but we do a lot of like managing, like so there's people who commercialize rivers, for example, and then there's, we take water from, Roosevelt Lake, for example, for the cities and stuff. So we do a lot of stuff with that. There's a lot of field work, like I said, and there's office work as well. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, I found this program through the Texas A&M job board, which is like so random because I went to Arizona State University. But yeah, so far it's been pretty cool. And yeah, if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Ruby. Yeah, I've actually explored the Texas A&M job board before too. I don't know why it's so robust or like who got the momentum going there, but I poked around there for it as well. So I'm very happy to see that they had some positions like this listed there. Let's see who else joined us. Josephine, could you kind of share where you're working at and what you're doing now, what program you're with?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Josephine. I'm in the same cohort as Ruby. So yeah, I'm also a resource assistant, RAP, in the RAP program, resource assistant position. Yeah, and I just started working a couple of weeks ago. I am in the watershed program with the Washington office of the Forest Service. Yeah, my complete title is Watershed Program Communication Intern. So I'm kind of like a digital assistant. I'm doing a lot of work on the computer. Actually, this internship I'm doing is 100% virtual. So I'm working on my computer that the government sent me. And yeah, some work I'm doing is first off getting familiar with the Forest Service and water programs, hydrology, because my background isn't specifically in that. Also, I am doing work on SharePoint sites with content, editing things. I'm also working on a specific project that my mentor assigned. We're working on to create a document called Working as a Hydrologist for the Forest Service. Yeah, so because there's not really like one document that can work for the entire agency. There's like a few that each region has for their own region, but we would like to make like a main one that works for the entire agency, working as a hydrologist for the Forest Service. Yeah, so we're getting that started. I am also working on creating a directory. That's something my mentor would like an online directory where different experts and hydrologists can put their contact information, so to facilitate connections, especially among like the early career hydrologists who might need some guidance from the experts. Yeah, so that's pretty much what I'm doing, what I'm working on, and it's been good so far. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Yeah, thanks, Josephine, and thanks for highlighting that, some folks are working in a virtual capacity right now and kind of highlighting the needs of your program, because it's good to know what folks are working on. And then Josh, do you also want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Josh Oram. I am working in Juneau, Alaska as a permit administrator for special uses. This is my first full year with the Forest Service, having been hired as with the direct authority Tanji was talking about. I was a resource assistant with Mobilize Green for 3 seasons and started actually with Student Conservation Association, which is also a great program. And yeah, so I was partnered with the Forest Service for many summers, and then through that got to kind of know people in the office. And when a position opened up, they looked at me and asked me to apply, and went through that whole process, which even with the direct hire, it's still quite the process. But yeah, I'm more in the office now, but still get out, do field work whenever I can. A lot of, not necessarily specifically scenic waterways, but we do a lot of, there's kayak rangers, and we get around by kayak in the bays and the sea, and do marine debris cleanup. Subsistence rights is a big thing. Fishing is huge. Work a lot with Native Alaskans, and trying to keep the watersheds as clear as possible. But yeah, we also have an intern. We just got a new intern with Greening Youth. So she's a resource assistant as well. So I keep learning more about the different resource assistant programs. It's pretty cool. And yeah, I'm excited to answer any questions about the hiring process. I know it can be pretty confusing, and it's good to start thinking about early. I'd say one big thing is the just your resume for USA jobs looks a lot different than resumes I've ever had in the past. So that's something to ask about and get familiar with before, if it's a close of a job you want, don't start that day, work on your resume. get started on that well in advance. But yeah, happy to answer any questions. Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. I feel like I should have handed the presentation over to you because your job sounds really awesome. But yeah, definitely kudos, or I guess touche on the advice about the resume. Those gigantic, long, complex resumes. We did have a question for anyone who gets to work around hydrology, asking about sort of the ratio of office work to field work. Can anyone speak to that a little bit around hydrology? If you know any folks, or if you're currently doing in-office versus field work around hydrology. Looks like Ruby kind of answered, but
I'm guessing that a hydrologist job is very field-based, super field-based.
I just answered it, so I do like half field work, half office work. And I think that's probably towards the top end of what a hydrologist would do, because there's a lot of field work that you have to do, but there's also a lot of data entering, and there's GIS that we have to do, and there's a lot of reading and answering emails, and there's a lot of office work to do when it comes to managing water in the national forest. So I think 50% is near the top end. But like my supervisor, for example, she's only in the field maybe once a week. Myself and the other hydrologists are in the field a lot more than she is. So it just really depends. I think she prefers 1 to 2 days of field work, so that's why she leaves the rest of it to us. But yeah.
I also wanted to add that my supervisor, her name is Joan Carlson. She is the watershed program, national watershed program leader. And I believe her work is entirely office-based. I guess also due to the fact that she's with the national office. So she's not like stationed in the field. So yeah, like Ruby says, you can have both. It depends.
right, yeah, that kind of speaks to Sarah's comment here too. Typically, higher grade level results in less field time, depending on what you're doing and how much you need to coordinate with other folks in the field that you work with. But yeah, typically higher grade level means supervisory duties and meeting with leadership teams and these kinds of things. So that's kind of an important thing to note about what you're searching for. If you do want to be in the field, it's important to look for the positions that get you spend the most time in the field.
I have another question. So mainly for those who are in the resource assistance program or have completed it, was that something, like, how did you find that program, and was that something that you started working on when you were still in your undergraduate degree, or did you graduate and then find that as another step out in your job search, or whatever that may be? Is that, how does that kind of work, and how do I get, like, the best, kind of shoe involved in that program?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can speak to it a little and then I'll let other people go from their perspective. But personally, I joined after I graduated, and I was actually looped into the resource assistance program because there's a handful of partners, like 5 or 6 partners, that post positions, that provide that mentorship framework, the funding, and sort of that recruitment to find interested students. And oftentimes they're seeking students from particular communities who have been underserved or excluded in the past. So like Hispanic Access Foundation was how I got into contact with the resource assistance program, and I started after I graduated. However, some of them like will have other programs. So like I did a 3-month internship over the summer with the Park Service one time through Hispanic Access Foundation because they have different options. And I am aware of a few students who have done a resource assistant position while being in school, but I'll let other people kind of speak to where they're at and when they started the program.
I can go. So as an undergraduate, I did not know anything about it, about this, these opportunities. So it was just this past summer that I did an internet search. I was looking for an internship, a virtual internship, where I could work like in my field of interest that has to do with the environment and natural resources. So that brought me to MANRRS. That's my partner organization, Minorities in Agriculture, Natural Resources and Related Sciences. So yeah, I found the application through them and I applied just this summer.
Yeah, do we have any folks that did resource assistance program while they were students, or did everyone graduate first before applying?
I was not an undergrad. I was well into my some other careers and kind of moved into this and was able to. I know a lot of people, it's difficult to make that decision to just even the seasonal. It is a paid internship, but it doesn't always pay as well as you could going in directly into the workforce. But it's more of an investment in into opportunities. So I'd look at it more like that, as far as, in one hand, I could do this internship with this great future, or I could start right into the workforce. I would really think about the things you can learn and the opportunities it will open. But yeah, also started later.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
I think one really cool thing about the resource assistance program is that they really have a push to directly hire everyone who goes through the program if they do a quality job. So for instance, my program I found after I had finished my master's degree, just a couple months after, and I also just was doing internet searches. I think I used the Conservation Job Board, if you've ever heard of that. It's a good job board. And I found this, and I had talked to a few people that said that pretty much everyone who had gone through the resource assistant position that they knew had resulted in a direct hire. So I think your odds are pretty good if you're investing in that program. It is an internship. It is a temporary thing, but your odds are pretty good if you do a quality job that you'll be hired on. And my position was a little bit different because I initially applied for a resource assistant position in a different area than what I actually ended up doing. So I applied for a recreation, I think it was like a sustainable recreation position. And I didn't get hired for it, but the forest actually contacted me because they saw that I had experience in wild and scenic rivers. That's what I researched for my master's degree. And they decided that it could be a really cool project to bring someone on, or just specifically to bring me on to work on a wild and scenic project. So they actually ended up creating another resource assistant position for me that wasn't actually flown. So it's a good idea also to just talk to forests or managers that are doing work that you're interested in, and maybe it could lead to something like that where they see value in you, create a position.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for sharing, Sarah. Yeah, I think it just really speaks to if you do get the chance to speak to folks at different units and you have an interest and they're like, hey, you know, we've always wanted to have someone who specializes in this or who is aware of this or who's working on this challenge that we have, the better positioned you are to utilize the time you have in school and the resources you have there to prepare yourself to meet the needs of the unit. And then they'd be super excited to have you, just as Sarah was able to build out that pool for them because they didn't have a lot of people with that expertise around wild and scenic rivers. But yeah, do we have any other questions?
I guess I just also like to add that as you are thinking about like what you're studying in school and making connections, just remember that RMS is a great resource. We do have like a student membership price. And with our listserv, it goes out to all of our members. I've seen people working on research projects and send out a question. You know, I'm working on a research project around public engagement of Native communities in this certain region, and what have other people done? And you can really get some great feedback, make connections with people who are doing things that you're interested in. It's such a great networking tool, a way to find potential mentors, and as well as like figure out what needs are out there in great places to like fill those gaps and make yourself an invaluable resource going forward.
Well, with that, I did also have a question for you, Angie. So I kind of did sort of fire hose method and shot all of the different programs in here. And I'm sure it's a little bit much for you guys to work through the links that I sent in here. So is there a way I could just send you a document that outlines them and then we could distribute to other folks who had an interest in the webinar series who aren't able to attend so that they do have the accompanying links?
Yeah, definitely. If you just send that to me, once the recording is all uploaded and ready to go, which usually takes just about 24 hours, I'll be sending that out to everyone who registered and attended, and I can also include the document that you send over to Angie and all of these awesome links that have been shared in the chat as well. So,
okay, awesome. Yeah, but if that's all the questions for now, maybe we could just highlight the next webinar we have coming up next month as part of the series, Angie.
yeah, let me get I also just wanted to provide one more time. I said I'd put it in the chat, which I forgot, but I will do now. Here's my email as well as Tangi's email. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. If you have any questions about the River Studies and Leadership Certificate, I'm happy to answer those as well, or pass you on to the person who can answer them best. And there's also a link to the certificate for from our website. And then our next discussion is going to be on Wednesday, November 10th at the same time. And we're going to be looking at how job opportunities out there relate to cultural and social priorities on public lands. So hoping that you can all join us for that. If you have any ideas about things that you'd also like to know about as far as like connecting to a career around rivers, feel free to email us. We'd love to make this series and these discussions as relevant as possible and as helpful as possible for you. So feel free to let us know what you want to know about as well. And that'll help us really kind of craft the last two discussions that we have left in this series. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Tanji. And
No, I don't think so. If you guys have any further questions, just follow up with us. And thanks again to all the folks who showed up to share a little bit about the experience and their work they're doing now. It's also exciting for me to get to hear that, just because I know there's a lot of amazing things that people get to do in the field. So it's nice to meet a few new faces here today. But yeah, just thanks everybody for your time, and we look forward to the next one next month.
yes, thanks everyone, and thanks to all of our panelists. And
Thank you so much.
Thanks for the invite. It's nice to meet you.